I sat there in the frigid county courtroom in Texas, my heart pounding like war drums, yet I forced my face to remain calm. I was Wyatt Lewis, 38 years old, CEO of a logistics company that everyone believed was teetering on the edge of collapse. At least, that's what they all wanted to think. Today was the final hearing in the divorce between me and Chloe Lewis, my wife, or rather my soon-to-be ex-wife. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy, like a storm about to break, and I could feel every sharp gaze stabbing into me. Chloe entered flanked by her parents, Bernard Hart and Lucille Hart. They filled the entire front row like an impregnable fortress. Beside them sat the high-profile divorce attorneys they had hired. Slick men in expensive suits carrying leather briefcases that probably cost more than most people's cars, looking ready to crush anyone who dared stand in their way. The Hart family, one of Texas's wealthiest, most powerful business dynasties, had money, connections, everything needed to turn this trial into a leisurely stroll. And me? I came alone. No attorney. Just an old personal briefcase stuffed with documents I had painstakingly organized during countless sleepless nights. From the very first moment, the imbalance of power was glaring. On one side, a crowd backed by glittering wealth and influence. On the other, just me, a solitary man standing in the eye of the hurricane. I felt like a gladiator lost in the Roman Colosseum with the crowd waiting to watch me be torn apart. My chest tightened as I looked at Chloe, the woman I had once loved, the mother of my daughter, now sitting there, shoulders hunched toward her parents, playing the part of the poor, wronged victim. Chloe's lead attorney began. His voice was clipped, commanding, a razor slicing straight at me. "Your Honor, all existing assets were acquired during the marriage. Mrs. Chloe Lewis personally managed the family finances and is the titled owner of numerous real estate and major investments." He rattled off the list: the suburban Dallas house, stock portfolios, even shares in my own company. Every item felt like a punch to the gut. I had to fight to keep the rage from boiling over. Then he turned the knife. "We cannot ignore Mr. Wyatt Lewis's prior bankruptcy. This clearly demonstrates he no longer possesses the financial competence to manage assets. Therefore, we request the court award the majority of the marital estate to Mrs. Lewis to protect the interests of the wife and children." My old bankruptcy, long-healed scar tissue, ripped open in front of everyone. I knew. I had lost everything once because of my first wife, and now history seemed to be repeating itself. But I was no longer that broken man. I had learned how to rise from ashes. Throughout the presentation, Bernard and Lucille nodded smugly, radiating certainty of victory. Bernard, the silver-bearded father-in-law with eyes like daggers, wore a triumphant smirk. Lucille, the mother-in-law with perfectly coiffed hair and glittering jewelry, sat ramrod straight like a queen on her throne. And Chloe? She played the perfect victim. Head bowed, eyes red, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. The abandoned, betrayed wife. Watching her act tore at me. She had once been the person I trusted most in the world, the one I shared long nights with. Now it was all theater. When the plaintiff's side finished, every eye in the room turned to me. The silence was suffocating, as if the entire gallery were waiting to see how spectacularly I would fall. I stood. My legs trembled slightly, but my voice stayed steady. "Your Honor, I am Wyatt Lewis, the defendant in this case. Since I have no attorney representing me, I will be defending myself." The moment the words left my mouth, Bernard let out a loud, mocking laugh. The sound echoed through the courtroom, dripping with contempt. It was a slap in the face from someone who believed he had already won. He leaned toward Lucille and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "A guy on the verge of bankruptcy can't even afford a lawyer? What a joke." Blood rushed to my head. I wanted to lunge at him, to scream in his face, but I held back. Not yet. Lucille curled her lip in a cold sneer, her gaze raking me from head to toe as if I were a beggar. She shook her head in disgust, making her disdain for my background and current situation crystal clear. In their eyes, I had always been the poor son-in-law, even after I built my company from nothing. Now that everything seemed to be collapsing, they looked at me like an insect. Chloe folded her arms, the corner of her mouth twisting into a scornful smirk. Her eyes were icy and victorious, utterly convinced that I, her soon-to-be ex-husband, was losing everything and had no financial means to fight back. In the minds of the entire Hart family, I was nothing more than a failing businessman forced to face them in court alone and defenseless. They were certain this divorce was decided the moment I walked in without counsel. I could feel their smugness radiating from every gesture. After the laughter and contemptuous stares, the courtroom fell into a thick, oppressive silence. All eyes fixed on me, waiting for the next failure. My pulse raced, sweat trickled down my back, but I didn't let it show. This was the moment to prove them wrong. The judge looked at me with visible concern, clearly aware of the massive imbalance. "Mr. Lewis, are you certain you wish to represent yourself? The court can grant a continuance so you may retain counsel and protect your rights." The Harts kept up their scorn. Bernard snorted. Lucille whispered something to Chloe, and Chloe smiled mockingly. They were positive I couldn't turn this around. I answered calmly, "Your Honor, I decline the continuance. I will represent myself to the end." I walked to the lectern with composure, a stark contrast to the defeated man they expected. My steps were firm, my voice clear. As I straightened at the podium, I saw Bernard's smug grin falter. He frowned, sensing something was off. Chloe's expression shifted to unease. Her eyes widened as she realized I did not look like a man who had lost everything. My gaze was too steady for someone supposedly broken, and in that instant the atmosphere in the courtroom suddenly unmistakably changed. I stood at the lectern, letting my cold gaze sweep slowly across every face on the Hart side. I lingered on Bernard for a moment, on Lucille a moment longer, and on Chloe longest of all. She shifted in her seat, fingers twisting her handkerchief into knots, and I knew the seed of doubt had already taken root inside her. This was the moment I turned the tables. My heart wasn't pounding from fear anymore. It was pounding from pure electric anticipation. I took a deep breath, then pulled out the neatly organized stacks of documents from my battered briefcase. Those pages, bank statements, transaction reconciliations, property transfer deeds, were my weapons, gathered during endless sleepless nights when everything had seemed lost. I handed them to the bailiff, voice perfectly calm. "Your Honor, I move to submit these exhibits and request they be passed up to the bench in accordance with procedure." The bailiff nodded, took the folders, and carried them to the judge. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Chloe's attorneys leaned in to whisper, their faces tightening. They thought I was just stalling. They were wrong. I began my response without theatrics, voice even and direct. "Your Honor, everything the plaintiff just presented is only the surface. I will prove there were systematic abnormal transactions in the marital finances. Transactions that were not ordinary family management as they claim." My words landed like a delayed fuse, and the temperature in the room immediately rose. I held up the first bank statement high enough for everyone to see, then passed it to the bailiff. "These are statements from our joint accounts. They show continuous large withdrawals, hundreds of thousands of dollars in just a few months." Chloe's lead counsel shot to his feet, still trying to sound confident, but I caught the faint tremor. "Your Honor, those withdrawals were normal household expenses and investments. There is nothing improper here." He sneered at me as if I were making it up, but I was ready. I allowed myself the smallest inward smile as I watched Bernard's frown deepen. I continued, calm and relentless. If they were normal expenses, why the sudden flood of transfers in an extremely narrow window? Here are the reconciliations I prepared from raw bank data. Look, in the 3 weeks immediately preceding the filing of the divorce petition, over $500,000 was moved without any legitimate explanation. I handed over the spreadsheets, red numbers glaring, and the gallery began to whisper. Chloe's attorney flushed, his next objection weaker. As spouses, Mrs. Lewis had every right to manage the funds. This is lawful in a marriage. I didn't give him time to breathe. I produced the next set, certified copies of property transfer deeds. And here is evidence that multiple assets were retitled immediately before the petition was filed. The Dallas house, which plaintiff claims Mrs. Lewis managed, was actually transferred to a Hart family holding company just 2 days prior. This is not management. This is deliberate concealment of marital assets. The words hit the room like a lightning strike. The contemptuous stares turned to suspicion, now aimed at Chloe and her parents. The air became so thick it could be cut with a knife, and my pulse raced with exhilaration. Chloe sat frozen, knuckles white, face draining of color. The fake tears had stopped. Real panic had taken their place. Bernard and Lucille whispered frantically. I caught the edge of Bernard's voice. How the hell does he have these? Bernard drummed his fingers on the chair arm. Lucille bit her lip, eyes darting. When I produced the final stack, invoices I had traced that turned out to be fabricated, Bernard could no longer contain himself. He shot to his feet, crimson-faced, jabbing a finger at me. These are fabricated documents. He has no right to slander our family like this. His outburst threw the courtroom into chaos. Lucille stood too, voice shrill. Stop this charade at once. It's all lies. Chloe whipped toward her attorneys, whispering frantically, voice shaking. The judge pounded the gavel repeatedly, the sharp cracks silencing everyone. Order. I will have order. Everyone sit down immediately or be removed. His face was flushed with anger. The Harts sat back down in humiliated silence, but their eyes betrayed raw unease. Bernard breathed heavily. Lucille clutched her husband's arm. Chloe stared at the floor. The room fell into a leaden hush. Every gaze swung back to me, waiting for the next blow. Chloe's attorney tried one last feeble objection, voice faltering, the earlier swagger gone. We will need time to review these documents. The tide had turned completely, and I felt it in every breath. The Hart family, for the first time, was on the defensive, cornered animals instead of confident hunters. Bernard's earlier smirk was gone. He now avoided my eyes, staring at the floor. Chloe pressed her lips together, face ashen, realizing the game was slipping from her grasp. Her breathing came faster, fingers clenched tighter. She was genuinely afraid now. I continued presenting, clear, concise, clinical, no emotional attacks, just facts and paper. Your Honor, here are the bank records proving a $300,000 transfer to Mr. Bernard Hart's personal account with no corresponding business purpose. One document after another explained precisely. No wasted words. The courtroom sank into breathless tension, only the rustle of paper, the clerk's quiet reading, the judge's pen tapping wood. Everyone held their breath, watching a slow-motion explosion. After examining the thick stack I had submitted, the judge paused, struck the gavel several times, and announced, "The court requires time to deliberate and reevaluate the entire record. We will recess for 15 minutes. His tone was grave, but I caught the new note of respect when he looked at me. The Harts sat rigid, their earlier certainty shattered. Chloe kept her head down, breathing labored, finally feeling control slip away for real. She was trembling now, no acting required. Bernard gripped the chair arm, face flushed with helpless fury. Lucille whispered frantically to counsel. I stepped back from the lectern, expression as composed as when I had entered. The entire courtroom held its breath, waiting for whatever came after the short recess. No one dared assume the Harts had this in the bag anymore. My heart hammered, but it was the thrill of the hunter who has just taken the lead. This was only the opening act, and I knew the real storm was still coming. I returned to my seat, letting my icy gaze sweep across the Hart family one last time without saying a word. They sat frozen like statues, but I could see the panic spreading through them. The courtroom now felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. The air was so thick I could hear every ragged breath around me. The 15-minute recess would feel like a century to them. I sat down, took a deep breath, and tried to stay calm, but memories flooded my mind. The nights I spent alone tracing every transaction, uncovering the betrayal. Now they were tasting the fear I had once endured. Suddenly Bernard could no longer contain himself. He charged toward me like a cornered animal, face crimson with rage. He grabbed my collar with surprising strength for his age, jerking me slightly off balance. "How dare you do this to my family, you little bastard?" he snarled, hot breath blasting my face, eyes bulging with murderous fury. "You're nothing but a bankrupt nobody, a dirt-poor son-in-law. How dare you slander us?" His roar echoed through the courtroom, startling everyone. I felt the pressure of his grip, but I didn't fight back. I simply stared straight into his eyes, cold and unflinching. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from years of pent-up anger at their arrogance, at the way they had always looked down on me. Lucille leapt up too, rushing at me with a twisted, furious expression. She unleashed a torrent of insults and curses, every vile word she had probably never uttered in public before. "You miserable piece of trash. You traitor, you liar. You'll pay for this." Her shrill voice rang out, red lacquered nails jabbing inches from my face as if she wanted to claw me apart. I stood still, silent, feeling only a strange mix of pity and ice-cold detachment. These people had once been my family, had sat at my dinner table. Now their true faces were fully exposed. Chloe broke into genuine, hysterical sobs. No more fake tears, just raw desperation. She pointed at me, screaming accusations. "You ungrateful monster. You've destroyed everything. How could you do this to me, to our daughter?" Her voice cracked, tears streaming, body shaking as if she might collapse. She lunged toward me but was held back by her attorneys, still shrieking, "You're a failure, and now you're dragging my whole family to hell." Her words cut deep, because once upon a time I had loved her, and she was the mother of our little girl. But that love had died long ago, murdered by her betrayal. The courtroom erupted into chaos, shouts, gasps, people standing. Spectators whispered loudly, the clerk yelled for silence. 2 burly uniformed bailiffs rushed in, prying Bernard off me. "Mr. Hart, step back now. This is a courtroom, not a bar fight." Bernard struggled, but they forced him back to his seat. Lucille and Chloe were ordered to their places as well, faces pale with humiliation and fury. The room reeked of sweat and tension. Echoes of shouting still bounced off the walls. The judge stormed back in at that exact moment, face flushed with anger. He pounded the gavel repeatedly, the sharp cracks silencing everyone. "Order. I will have order. I warn every person in this room. One more outburst and you will be removed or fined." His voice thundered. Bernard collapsed into his chair, panting. Lucille wiped sweat from her brow. Chloe sobbed into her hands. The room gradually quieted, but the tension hung like a black cloud. From beginning to end, I had not resisted, had not answered a single insult. I simply straightened my collar, expression serene. Inside, my anger had already cooled. Not forgiveness, just the calm of someone who knows the loser is the one thrashing. When silence finally returned, the judge looked at me. I spoke only one short, glacial sentence. "The truth always finds its own way to the surface. They just have to wait and face the consequences." The words rang in the silence like a curse. Bernard froze, eyes wide, mouth open but speechless. Lucille went rigid, hands trembling. Chloe suddenly stopped crying, real dread flooding her face. They stared at me like I was a ghost, and I knew those words had struck the very center of their fear. With order restored, the judge resumed. He flipped through the new evidence, the atmosphere heavier than ever. Everyone sat motionless, waiting. After reviewing everything, the judge cleared his throat and spoke, voice carrying to every corner. "Having examined the submissions, the court hereby orders an immediate freeze on all transactions involving the disputed marital estate. All related bank accounts and real property are placed under judicial hold to prevent further dissipation." He paused, scanning the room. "The court finds credible indications of serious fraudulent conduct in the movement and management of assets. An independent forensic investigation by the appropriate authorities is ordered." The announcement hit like a bomb. Until the investigation concluded, I was recognized as the injured party, meaning all my rights would be protected. The Hart family sat stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. Bernard jumped up again, voice shaking with rage. "Your Honor, this is a mistake. We demand an immediate review." Chloe's attorneys scrambled to object, stammering, "We request the order be stayed, Your Honor, to allow time to produce additional evidence." Every plea was shot down on the spot. Requests denied. No new evidence has been presented. The ruling stands. The gavel fell with finality. Chloe collapsed into her chair, face chalk-white, eyes vacant, silently weeping. Bernard stood rooted, fists shaking with helpless fury, lips moving soundlessly. Lucille sat speechless, eyes wide in horror. I remained standing in place, no cheering, no triumphant grin. Just the quiet certainty that the scales of justice had finally tipped. In that moment, I felt no elation, only the sense that a new door had opened to the rest of the truth waiting beyond. My heartbeat steadied, but my thoughts were with my daughter waiting for me at home. Everything I had done was for her. The courtroom now resembled a battlefield after the fight, whispers everywhere, but for me it was a turning point. They had thought me weak. Now they would face the consequences. The real storm was still coming, and I was ready. The judge sat at the bench, turning the final pages of the file, his polished gavel poised to fall and end the hearing. The courtroom was still heavy with the aftershock of the asset freeze ruling. People were beginning to stretch, to whisper about what had just happened. Bernard sat rigid, face flushed crimson. Lucille murmured frantically to counsel, voice trembling. Chloe kept her head down, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, afraid to look up. They thought it was over, that they could go home and figure out how to reverse the damage. But I knew better. I drew a deep breath and stood once more, my voice cutting through the loosening atmosphere like a blade. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I request to make one final statement before this hearing is adjourned." The room fell instantly, deathly silent. Every eye snapped to me, the judge, the clerk, the gallery, the Harts. The judge paused, gavel still in hand, surprise and curiosity in his expression. "Mr. Lewis, do you have additional evidence to submit?" he asked, tone grave but open. I didn't answer immediately. I simply nodded. My heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the electric thrill of the moment I had waited for. This was it, the killing blow I had kept hidden until the very last second. Without a word of explanation, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a second, unusually thick folder, the one I had compiled in absolute secrecy, containing evidence that went far beyond a normal divorce. I placed it on the clerk's desk, voice calm. "Your Honor, I move to submit this final exhibit and request it be passed directly to the bench." Every gaze locked onto that heavy folder like it was a live grenade. The air snapped taut again. Whispers died instantly, leaving only the rustle of paper as the clerk carried it up. I saw Bernard's frown deepen. Lucille clutch her husband's arm, Chloe lift her head, eyes wide with sudden dread. They sensed something was terribly wrong, but they had no idea how bad it truly was. My pulse hammered, sweat traced down my spine, yet I stood motionless, face serene. The judge took the folder, opened it, and began slowly turning the first pages. His expression changed immediately, from calm to grave, eyes narrowing, lips pressing into a hard line. I saw it clearly, and my heart raced with exhilaration. He turned more pages, fingers tightening slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what he was reading. The courtroom sank into uneasy silence. Confused glances flickered across faces. Spectators whispered, "What is it? Why does the judge look like that?" Bernard shifted in his seat, color draining from his face. Lucille bit her lip. Chloe stared at me in open horror as if I had become a stranger. The judge read several more pages, then set the folder down. His voice, when it came, was iron. "The documents just submitted reveal evidence of serious criminal conduct, including large-scale financial fraud and other unlawful activities. This is no longer an ordinary civil divorce proceeding." The words struck the room like a thunderbolt. A wave of shock rippled outward. Everyone held their breath, eyes swiveling to the Hart family. The judge immediately handed the folder to the assistant district attorney, a gray-suited man who had been quietly observing from the corner since the start of the hearing. The prosecutor stepped forward, took the file, and began flipping through it with growing speed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his face darkened with every page. The courtroom became a tomb, only the rustle of paper. He stopped, inhaled sharply, then looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, these materials are extremely serious. To prevent destruction of evidence and ensure a proper investigation, the state moves for the immediate custodial detention of Bernard Hart and Lucille Hart." The request detonated like an explosion. The judge brought the gavel down once. "Motion granted. Bailiffs, execute the detention order in this courtroom." Uniformed court officers, two large men in dark green, marched straight to the front row. Their voices rang out, clear and official. "Mr. Bernard Hart, Mrs. Lucille Hart, you are both being taken into custody pending investigation on charges of financial fraud. Please stand and cooperate." The words hit like lightning. Bernard froze for several seconds, eyes bulging in disbelief. Then he erupted, thrashing, "You can't do this. I'm Bernard Hart. I have rights." But the officers seized his arms, twisted them behind his back. Handcuffs clicked shut. He struggled, face purple, but his old strength was no match. Lucille collapsed to her knees with a wail as the cuffs snapped on, clutching a chair to keep from falling. "No. Please. We're innocent." Jewelry glittered absurdly against the scene of her humiliation. Chloe sat paralyzed, hands trembling over her face, white as paper, staring in mute horror as her parents were taken away. Her body shook uncontrollably. The courtroom exploded. People leapt to their feet. Gasps and frantic whispers filled the air. It was just a divorce. How did it turn into criminal fraud? Word spread like wildfire. Someone had already called the press. Within minutes, reporters swarmed outside, camera flashes bursting through the windows, shouted questions echoing down the hall. While the Harts were led to a side rooms, Bernard still struggling, Lucille sobbing, Chloe slumped in her seat, I quietly closed my briefcase. I did not look back. I said nothing more. My heart pounded, but it was the steady rhythm of a man who had just completed his mission. I walked out of the courtroom, down the long corridor, the noise fading behind me. Outside, under the blinding flashes of cameras, I stepped into my car and drove away. The Texas evening wind blew through the open window, carrying the familiar smell of dust and road. Behind me, a full-scale criminal case had just been opened, a storm the Hart family no longer had the power to weather. I drove down the highway, mind replaying the months I had spent tracing money trails, uncovering shell companies, money laundering schemes they thought were airtight. That final folder, proof of massive systematic fraud that reached far beyond our marriage, was the killing stroke. I felt no triumph, only relief. My daughter would be safe and justice at long last had arrived. Streetlights streaked past the windshield, stretching into long, ghostly ribbons of light across the Texas night, like cuts across the dark sky. I drove in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, the wind slipping through the cracked window carrying the familiar scent of damp earth and gasoline. The hearing had ended less than 30 minutes ago, yet it felt as though an entire lifetime had passed. Old memories suddenly flooded back, vivid in slow motion, dragging me into a past I thought I had buried deep, a past of triumph and excruciating pain. I remembered the years when I was a successful entrepreneur, owner of my own logistics company in Houston, with a sprawling office overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. I was only 28, brimming with ambition and energy. The company grew fast. Contracts with major corporations, trucks rolling across the state, wealth piling up day by day. I had my own house, luxury cars, and a future that seemed limitless. Every morning I woke up feeling like the master of the universe. Endless meetings, business trips, the sound of employees laughing in the hallways. I truly believed life would stay that way forever. Success, stability, happiness. Then everything collapsed because of one marriage. My first marriage, the one I once believed was fate. My first wife, Emily, entered my life like a cool breeze. We met at a business reception. She was beautiful, brilliant, and seemed to understand me better than anyone. We married after only 6 months of dating, and I thought I had found my perfect match. But gradually, strange signs appeared. Emily began interfering in my business, asking detailed questions about finances, convincing me to let her help manage certain accounts. I trusted her blindly. She was my wife, after all. Then one day, everything shattered. I discovered she had been cheating and conspiring with a former partner to bleed the company dry. They emptied joint accounts, funneled money into shell companies, and sabotaged contracts. Partners turned their backs. Clients fled, banks foreclosed. In a matter of months, I went from CEO to a bankrupt man drowning in debt. That period took almost everything from me. Money vanished like smoke. My reputation was smeared across local papers, friends avoided me like the plague, and my faith in marriage, the very foundation of life, was destroyed. I remember those long nights alone in a cheap rented apartment, staring at towering stacks of overdue bills, heart aching as if sliced open. There were moments I wanted to give up. Nights I clutched a bottle of whiskey and cried like a child. But survival instinct kicked in. It took years of clawing my way back from zero. But I rebuilt piece by piece. I worked myself to the bone, starting with odd jobs, then slowly reconstructing a new logistics company. Every small contract was a victory, every saved dollar a solid step forward. I learned caution, learned never to trust blindly again, and swore history would never repeat itself. Then I met Chloe. It was at a business conference in Dallas. She stood out with her radiant smile and razor-sharp mind. We talked, we dated, and slowly I let myself open up again. When I decided to marry a second time, I told myself I deserved another chance. This time will be different, I thought as I knelt under a star-filled sky and proposed. We had a daughter, and for the first few years everything seemed perfect. Mornings waking up together, family vacations, the sound of a child's laughter filling the house. I believed I had finally found real happiness, that the old wounds had healed. But the longer we lived together, the more I noticed Chloe shared too many traits with Emily. Small things that made my stomach knot. She asked overly detailed questions about my assets, as if making an inventory. How many shares do you have now? Whose name is the suburban house under? At first I took it as concern, but the questions grew too precise, too urgent. She showed an unusual interest in cash flow, constantly checked the company books, and always wanted to help manage finances because I'm better at keeping track than you are. Those little details gradually awakened the vigilance in me, the same instinct that had once saved me from ruin. I remember the exact moment, a late night when Chloe sat at the computer poring over bank records with an intensity that felt wrong. I stood in the doorway, a chill running down my spine. Is this happening to me again? I asked myself, heart racing. Instead of confronting her immediately, I chose quiet observation. I began backing up every financial record, copying every transaction, storing contracts, and without telling a soul, I hired a forensic accountant to trace the money flows. From that moment on, I prepared for the worst, even while still hoping deep down that I was wrong about Chloe. Sometime later, I began to see Chloe's scheme slowly emerge, piece by piece, and behind her stood the direct involvement of the entire Hart family. At first, they were just small signs, but gradually they fitted together into a chillingly clear picture that turned my heart to ice. Chloe began interfering more deeply with money and documents. She constantly asked me to sign financial papers, bank authorizations, and investment contracts, always with seemingly reasonable excuses like tax optimization or protecting assets for Lily. I remember one evening vividly. We were sitting on the sofa after dinner, and Chloe handed me a thick stack of papers with her sweetest smile. Just sign, honey. I've already checked everything. This will save us taxes and protect Lily's future. I looked into her eyes, searching for any flicker of deceit, but she played the part perfectly. Sparkling gaze, gentle voice. I signed, but every detail was burned into my memory, and the moment she left the room, I photographed every page. My pulse raced because I knew this wasn't help. It was the first move in a much larger plan. At the same time, the Hart family was pulling strings from behind the scenes. Bernard suggested great opportunities to invest in his companies. Lucille sent urgent emails with contracts that couldn't wait. They funneled money into their businesses under the guise of joint ventures, retitled assets for optimization, and rushed decisions that gradually pushed me out of control of my own finances. It was all visible in the statements. $100,000 transferred to Hart Enterprises with no clear invoices. The vacation home suddenly titled solely in Chloe's name as a family gift. Each time it felt like a hand tightening around my throat, but I stayed calm. I remember a family dinner at the Hart estate when Bernard clapped me on the shoulder and laughed. "Wyatt, let Chloe handle it. She's brilliant with money." Lucille nodded, eyes gleaming. "That's right. Let us take some of the load off you." I smiled back, but inside I was frozen. They were edging me out inch by inch. The more time passed, the clearer it became that I was being systematically deceived. The pieces formed a sophisticated conspiracy. My heart ached every time I thought about it because this wasn't just about money. It was betrayal by the woman I loved. Yet I chose to pretend ignorance, deliberately appearing careless so they would keep revealing their hand. I forgot to check the books, gave Chloe more freedom, even acted overwhelmed with work so they would believe I was oblivious. In the evenings, when she brought papers for signature, I signed quickly without questions, but afterward I photographed everything. I remember lying beside her in the dark, listening to her steady breathing, wondering whether she had ever truly loved me or whether I was just a piece on their board. The tension was electric. I was playing a deadly game of chess where one wrong move could cost me everything again. From that point on, I began gathering evidence methodically, like a detective in my own home. I backed up every financial transaction, stored encrypted copies in private cloud accounts with no trace left behind. Every suspicious transfer was noted: date, time, amount, recipient. I tracked irregular signings, investments in Bernard's phantom projects where money flowed out and nothing came back. I saved every asset title change and cash flow shift, from bank receipts to internal emails. I even hired a forensic accountant in absolute secrecy and sent him encrypted data for analysis. Those late-night calls, voice barely above a whisper. "Find anything unusual?" The reports came back damning. Investments that were disguised transfers, inflated invoices for tax evasion, unexplained funds from unknown sources. My heart pounded with every new file, but I kept silent and continued the act of ignorance. While Chloe and her family accelerated the draining and legitimizing of assets, I maintained an outward calm, as if I suspected nothing. Chloe grew bolder. She asked me to sign blanket bank powers of attorney just in case. And the Harts pushed larger transfers, hundreds of thousands for joint projects. I could feel their urgency. Bernard's urgent calls. "Wyatt, sign now, the opportunity won't wait." Lucille sending gifts that came with attached deeds transferring property. They thought I was naive, thought I was too busy to notice. I remember one night when Chloe hugged me and whispered, "You're so tired, let me take care of everything." I smiled and nodded, but inside I was ice. She was speeding up the plan and I was letting them dig their own grave. It didn't stop at marital assets. While tracing the money, I accidentally stumbled onto far graver wrongdoing inside the Hart family businesses. That was the moment everything truly crystallized. Late one night, analyzing the forensic report, I saw the money didn't stop in our accounts. It flowed on to Hart-controlled shell companies overseas. Digging deeper revealed projects with massively inflated costs, millions reported for construction that never happened, money laundering loops through foreign entities, and unexplained funds with no legitimate source. I sat in the dark, cold sweat breaking out as I read the conclusion. "This is systematic fraud on a scale that likely constitutes criminal activity." The full picture snapped into place. The Harts, Texas's shining business dynasty, were running an organized criminal network, and my marriage had been nothing more than a tool to expand it. Chloe wasn't a victim, she was a willing accomplice, trained from childhood by her parents. The truth crushed me. I had genuinely loved her, had dreamed of a happy family. But now it was undeniable. Those family meetings were planning sessions. Their advice was manipulation. I remembered Bernard raising his glass at one dinner to our family growing stronger. Now I understood. Stronger on my ruins. From that instant, I decided to cast the net wide and catch them all. I gathered every last piece of evidence in absolute silence, linking every anomaly, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal everything. At the exact second, no one would see it coming. For a long time, I kept up the perfect act of calm ignorance, letting Chloe and her family handle every financial matter exactly as they wished. I pretended to be swamped with work, told Chloe I trusted her completely, even praised her. "You're so good at this stuff, you've taken such a weight off my shoulders." The words tasted like honey in my mouth, but my heart was ice. I was handing them the rope to hang themselves. Chloe accelerated the signing, the transfers, the reshuffling of assets, all while wearing the mask of the devoted wife. Every evening she brought new papers, smiling softly. "Just sign, sweetheart. I've checked everything. This will make our family more secure." I signed, then photographed every page the moment she turned away, noting every detail and tracking where the money went. Larger transfers followed. $150,000 to Bernard's account for a joint investment, the vacation home quietly retitled solely in Chloe's name for easier management. After each signature, she hugged me and whispered, "I'm doing all this for you and Lily." Those words once melted me. Now they were knives. A flawless performance. Behind the scenes, the Harts pulled harder on the strings, draining capital, shifting cash flows, and quietly loading debt onto my company like silent, venomous snakes in the dark. Bernard called more often, dangling attractive bank loans that were really just ways to saddle me with more obligations. Lucille sent urgent emails with contracts that couldn't wait, pushing money into their projects. They sped everything up. Fake investment agreements, disguised transfers under the guise of business partnerships, gradual retitling of assets so no one would notice. The bank statements told the story. Money poured out of our joint accounts like water, yet nothing came back. My company began to falter. Invoices piled up, cash flow dried, banks tightened the screws. I pretended not to notice, letting them believe their plan was working perfectly. My pulse raced every time the forensic accountant's report arrived. This is small-scale money laundering linked to a much larger network. I sat alone in my office, cold sweat on my skin, but I stayed patient. This was the moment that demanded patience above all. I let everything unfold exactly as they scripted it. No interference, no questions, no resistance. I forgot to review the books, invented business trips, gave Chloe more freedom than ever. When she brought papers in the evening, I signed without hesitation, even smiled. "You decide, babe. I trust you completely." Behind her back, I backed up everything, recorded calls with Bernard, tracked every dollar. Then the loans came due all at once. Cash flow vanished. Banks seized assets. Partners canceled contracts. It happened lightning fast. Phones ringing off the hook from creditors, cancellation emails from clients, overdue notices stacked on my desk. In weeks, the business I had rebuilt from nothing after my first bankruptcy was once again on the brink of collapse. I remember sitting in my office staring at red numbers, heart aching like it was being carved out. Employees panicked, some quit. The office felt like a funeral. For a moment, I considered confronting them right then, but no, this was part of the plan. I let them believe I was crumbling, helpless, while I needed the final pieces of evidence. As the crisis deepened, Chloe dropped the loving wife mask completely. The gentle woman who once comforted me through hard times turned cold. She blamed me openly for the company's failure, voice dripping with contempt. "How did you let it get this bad? This is all your fault. One evening at the dinner table under the harsh kitchen light, her face was no longer soft, only scorn. I searched her eyes for any remnant of affection and found only calculation. My heart broke all over again. This was the woman I had loved, trusted, and she was fully complicit. Bernard and Lucille shed their pretense too, openly treating me as worthless. They visited more often, no longer to help, but to push the plan forward. The fake hugs and compliments vanished, replaced by undisguised disdain. They thought I was finished, powerless, and they held all the cards. That night, the house, usually quiet, became a pressure cooker ready to explode. It started with one simple question from me. Where did the $200,000 transferred to Bernard's company come from? And why is the lake house suddenly only in Chloe's name without my consent? Silence, then chaos. Chloe slammed her glass down first, water splashing across the table. Who do you think you are, questioning me? That was a normal investment. You're bankrupt because you're incompetent. Don't blame me. She lunged forward, jabbing a finger into my chest. When you were at rock bottom, who stood by you? Me. And now you turn on me? Bernard shot up and roared in my face. Shut your mouth. You have no right to question any financial decision in this house. Your company is drowning. Don't drag us down with you. He stepped closer, nose to nose. From now on, you stay out of money matters. Understood? Lucille didn't shout. She gave a cold, spine-chilling smile. Thought you were so clever, didn't you? You're just a lucky beggar who married my daughter. When you're broke, you keep quiet and stop playing detective. She pointed straight at my face. Chloe owning the house is only right. A bankrupt like you has nothing left to put his name on anyway. The air exploded. All three closed in, shouting, slamming things, shoving chairs. A battlefield in our own dining room. Chloe screamed, mask completely gone. I'm done. You're paranoid about money. You're the biggest burden of my life. Tears streamed, but they were tears of rage and hatred, not pain. I stood in the center of the three of them, three distorted faces twisted by greed and fear of exposure, and felt the pain shift into an icy clarity. You've been stealing from me, I said slowly, quietly, every word a blade laid on the table. They shouted over me, cursed, threatened, but every word only confirmed what I already knew. I looked at each of them. No more love, no more confusion, only painful, blinding truth. Everything I needed was right here in their real faces. That same night, I packed and left the house, taking every document, every backup, everything that still belonged to me. I moved quickly under dim light, heart pounding with both anguish and adrenaline. Chloe watched me, crying, Where are you going? Think of Lily. I held our daughter one last time, whispered, Daddy promises he'll come back for you. I drove out of the garage with the safe containing all the evidence, heading to a hotel. Days later, Chloe filed for divorce. Certain the Harts had already won. They saw me as a broken, bankrupt man with nothing left. The divorce trial was scheduled quickly, exactly as their arrogance predicted. They expected me to beg, to surrender. Instead, the outcome turned everything upside down. The judge's gavel fell like an executioner's axe. Assets frozen, the tide reversed, the Harts thrown from certain victory into sudden defense. I still remember that moment, the gavel's crack as I drove away from the courthouse through the crowded streets, the sound echoing in my head while the Texas wind blew through the open window carrying the smell of the city. A new chapter had begun. After the divorce hearing, the criminal file against the Hart family was officially taken over by the prosecution for an expanded investigation. Just days later, my private attorney emailed me. Mr. Lewis, it started. The prosecutor is reviewing the evidence you submitted. My heart beat a little faster as I read it. Sitting in the small temporary office I had rented on the outskirts of Houston, the place where Lily and I were now staying. I no longer lived in the old house filled with memories of betrayal. In the first days after the hearing, I devoted myself entirely to Lily, taking her to school, playing in the park, reading bedtime stories. She asked about her mother and I only smiled. Mommy's very busy with work, sweetheart. Daddy will always be here. But at night after she fell asleep, I sat alone following the news. The press had begun covering it. Hart dynasty accused of financial fraud after shocking divorce. I read with a cold heart. They had once been my family, now they were enemies of justice. In the following days, Bernard and Lucille were repeatedly summoned for questioning about financial transactions, cash flows, and offshore shell companies. I pictured the scenes. Bernard in a freezing interrogation room under harsh fluorescent lights, face crimson as the prosecutor asked about a $300,000 unexplained transfer. How do you explain the shell company in the Cayman Islands? The question would hang in the air while he stammered and tried to deny everything. Lucille fared no better. The once haughty woman now sat trembling, clutching a paper cup of water, forced to account for inflated invoices. My attorney kept me updated. They're cooperating, but their statements contradict each other. Your evidence is tearing them apart. My pulse raced with tension. This was the moment they finally felt the pressure I had once endured when they pushed me toward bankruptcy. At the same time, Chloe was summoned multiple times as the person who directly executed the signatures, authorizations, and asset concealment. The gentle wife I once knew now had to face prosecutors and explain bank powers of attorney and transfers into her own name. The evidence was merciless. Emails, handwritten notes, everything pointed to her active complicity. My attorney wrote, "She cried a lot, but her testimony is full of holes." I sat in the rented apartment watching rain tap the window, feeling a strange sadness, not pity but regret for what had once existed. Chloe was Lily's mother, the woman I had loved, but betrayal had killed everything. Investigators froze every Hart family account and related company, combing through years of cash flows. I still remember the notice. All accounts frozen. They can't touch a cent. Luxury properties titled through intermediaries, mansions in Dallas, vacation villas, were sealed with bright red police tape. The media went wild. Photos of Bernard leaving the prosecutor's office with his head down, Lucille surrounded by paparazzi. The Hart's financial crimes were peeled open layer by layer, impossible to hide any longer. Inflated project costs, money laundering through subsidiaries, unexplained millions. I followed it all, heart pounding with the drama. Hart case, tens of millions in unexplained funds uncovered. Legal pressure tightened daily. Formal criminal indictment of Bernard, Lucille, and Chloe became inevitable. One late evening, rain drumming on the roof, Chloe appeared at my door, distraught and soaked. I was reading Lily to sleep when the doorbell rang. I opened it and there she stood, hair disheveled, eyes swollen, clothes drenched, no trace of her former polished beauty. She collapsed to her knees instantly, sobbing, rain and tears streaming together. "Wyatt, please, please forgive me, forgive my family." Her voice broke with desperation. She admitted everything had spiraled out of control, begged me to withdraw the complaint, to ask the prosecutor for leniency so her parents wouldn't go to prison. I never thought it would come to this. I only wanted what was best for the family. My parents are old. They won't survive prison. She invoked Lily, our past marriage, the years we had shared, trying to soften me. Think of Lily, she needs her grandparents. We were happy once, Wyatt. Please, for those memories. I stood silent, gaze cold, no shred of mercy left. My heart had once ached for her, but now only ice remained. Betrayal had murdered every feeling. I spoke clearly, evenly. "Chloe, I no longer have any power to stop the investigation. Everything is now in the hands of the law. You and your family will face the consequences of what you did." The words cut like a knife, but they were the truth. She clung to my arm one last time in desperation. "Wyatt, I'm begging you, don't let me lose everything." Her tears soaked my shirt, but I gently removed her hands and closed the door, ending the final chapter of our marriage forever. Her crying echoed outside, but I turned away, went to Lily's room and held my daughter tighter. That night I didn't sleep. memories swirling, yet I felt no regret. Only days later, the prosecution formally indicted the Hart family for financial fraud, money laundering, and asset misappropriation. Bernard and Lucille were taken into pretrial detention. Television showed them being led away in handcuffs. Bernard head bowed, Lucille sobbing hysterically. In the next wave, Chloe was also indicted as an accomplice and arrested while attempting to flee with remaining assets. She was caught at the airport trying to wire money overseas. Photos of Chloe in handcuffs, pale and disheveled, spread across every front page within hours under headlines like, "Ex-wife of logistics CEO arrested as accomplice in massive fraud." The story dominated financial and legal news for weeks. 24/7 coverage, expert panels, analyses titled, "The Fall of the Hart Empire." The once untouchable Texas business dynasty collapsed in a chain reaction investigation. Their stock plummeted, partners fled, public opinion turned vicious. Society finally learned that the sensational divorce had only been the opening act of a much larger scandal. And I, the man everyone had seen as bankrupt and empty-handed at the divorce hearing, had quietly turned the entire board, bringing an entire powerful family to justice. I sat in my rented apartment watching Lily play and for the first time felt true relief. The investigation continues, but for me, the old chapter is closed. I didn't win through revenge, but through the truth. The criminal trial officially opened after months of exhaustive investigation and evidence gathering. Months during which the press never stopped reporting. Public opinion boiled, and crushing pressure bore down on the Hart family. I received my witness summons and my heart pounded as I walked back into the familiar Houston courthouse. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. A larger courtroom packed with reporters, spectators, and heavy security. The judge, a different man, stern with a silver beard and a deep, resonant voice, struck the gavel to open the proceedings. This criminal trial against defendants Bernard Hart, Lucille Hart, and Chloe Lewis on charges of organized financial fraud, fraudulent appropriation of property, money laundering, and concealment of assets is hereby in session. His words echoed. The room fell deathly silent except for the rapid click of camera shutters from the back. Bernard, Lucille, and Chloe appeared one by one at the dock as defendants, looking nothing like they had at the divorce hearing. Bernard, once so proud in his expensive suits, now wore plain prison garb, gaunt silver stubble longer, eyes darting, avoiding everyone. Lucille, formerly dripping with jewelry, had disheveled hair, no makeup, shoulders trembling as she stepped forward. And Chloe. My chest tightened when I saw her. Thin, red-eyed hair in a simple ponytail, a ghost of the woman I once loved. For a moment, her gaze found mine from the defendant's side, filled with desperation and resentment, but I looked away. There was nothing left to say. They stood there, loosely cuffed under harsh lights, small and pathetic before the towering wooden dock. The prosecutor, a sharp-voiced, middle-aged woman, listed the charges. The defendants participated in a systematic, organized fraud, misappropriating Mr. Wyatt Lewis's assets and laundering money through shell companies. Her words cut like knives, the gallery stirred. Every piece of evidence I had submitted at the divorce hearing was brought forward again in the criminal trial, replayed in slow, devastating detail. The prosecutor presented thick folders, bank statements, internal emails, transaction records I had collected through countless sleepless nights. I sat in the witness section, heart racing as they flashed on the giant screen, unexplained transfers, forged contracts, everything interlocking perfectly. The entire money trail, offshore shells, fake agreements, and asset concealment schemes were laid bare before the public. The prosecutor pointed at the screen. This is a $500,000 transfer to a Cayman Islands shell company falsely recorded as an investment. And here is an email from defendant Chloe Lewis directing the retitling of assets. The courtroom was breathless, only the rustle of paper and reporters' whispers. I watched Bernard hang his head, Lucille bite her lip, Chloe cover her face, shoulders shaking. The evidence I had gathered had become the fatal blow, undeniable. One by one, the defense arguments collapsed against the mountain of proof. Their attorney, a tall man with a deep voice, tried. The defendants were victims of a financial misunderstanding. There was no intent to defraud. The prosecutor fired back. Misunderstanding? Here is an email from Bernard Hart personally instructing money laundering. The gallery gasped. The lawyer flushed, stumbling. The Harts began blaming one another, chaos erupting even inside the dock. Bernard shouted when questioned. It was Chloe's idea. She handled everything. Lucille hissed. Don't pin it on me, you signed everything. Chloe sobbed. I only did what my parents told me. The judge pounded the gavel repeatedly. Order, or I will clear the dock. I sat watching them destroy each other, heart steady but electrified. It was a tragic play unfolding exactly as it had to. After days of tense proceedings with the media in a frenzy and public outrage boiling, the judge delivered the sentences. He rose, voice grave. Having considered all evidence, the court sentences Bernard Hart to 22 years imprisonment and Lucille Hart to 18 years imprisonment for organized criminal activity and large-scale financial fraud. Bernard froze, face ashen, hands gripping the rail, trembling. Lucille wailed, nearly collapsing, supported by guards. The judge continued without pause. Chloe Lewis is sentenced to 9 years imprisonment for complicity in fraud and attempted asset flight. Chloe crumpled, sobbing uncontrollably, calling my name in desperation. All illicit assets were confiscated, houses, cars, stocks gone like smoke. The court ordered full restitution to me of everything lawfully mine and voided every debt created by their fraud. The gavel's final strike detonated a storm of noise in the courtroom. Afterward, I left quietly, ignoring the media swarm. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed. Mr. Lewis, how do you feel now that your ex-wife's family has been sentenced? I kept my head down, walked through the crowd, and got into the waiting car. My heart was calm. No more hatred, only profound relief after years of endurance. From a man the world saw as bankrupt and empty-handed at the divorce trial, I had become the one who silently overturned the board and brought an entire powerful dynasty to justice. The press called me the silent hero, but I didn't care. I only wanted to forget. I took Lily and left the noisy city, starting a completely new life in a quiet Texas lakeside town. We moved into a wooden house by the water just weeks later. Lily was thrilled with the new garden, running and laughing. After 2 failed marriages in ruins, I no longer believed in marriage. I chose to remain single and devote myself entirely to raising my daughter. My days now revolved around work, rebuilding a smaller, safer company, Lily, and the quiet moments I never had before. School runs, simple dinners, reading by the fireplace. The old wounds never fully disappeared, but I learned to live with them without letting them rule me. In our new home on peaceful evenings, I finally understood that my life had turned a real page. No more schemes, no more betrayal, just a father and daughter and a free future. I sit on the porch watching Lily chase butterflies in the golden sunset light, and I feel true peace. Life is full of surprises, but now I am its master. The trial is over, and I, Wyatt Lewis, am finally free. After all the trials, the sentences, and the collapse of the Hart family, my life slowly returned to a normal rhythm, one I had never known before. Slow, steady, and quiet. I remember the first days after the verdict. The press still hunted me. Phones rang nonstop with interview requests, but I turned everything off, locked the door, and focused on cleaning up my life. I sold the old Houston house, the big one with the sprawling lawn that had once echoed with fake laughter and secret plots, closing forever the memories of betrayal and calculation. The sale gave us enough to start fresh, debt-free, unencumbered. Part of it paid off the old debts the Harts had piled on me. The rest bought this simple, warm wooden house with an open kitchen and bedrooms overlooking the lake. Lily and I moved to a quieter small town a few hours from Houston, the kind of place I used to dream about during sleepless nights. Cobblestone streets, friendly cafes, a community where people actually greet each other in the morning. Lily adjusted beautifully. A small school with kind teachers, neighborhood kids playing in the yard, afternoons fishing by the lake. Her smile became the only thing that made every loss feel worth it. Whenever she laughs out loud, runs to hug me after school and chatters about the pictures she drew in class. I forget the endless nights gathering evidence, the tense courtrooms, the pain of betrayal. Lily is my light, the reason I fought to the end. I teach her simple truths. Always be honest, sweetheart. Lies only bring suffering. She nods solemnly, unaware those words come from the deep scar inside her father. I rebuilt my career on the old foundation, slowly, solidly, no longer chasing ambition or glory. My new logistics company is small, just a handful of loyal employees who followed me from the old firm, focused on local contracts instead of statewide expansion. I work from home in a room overlooking the garden with a laptop and simple ledgers. No more marathon meetings, no more high-stakes gambles, just steady shipments and income enough for a comfortable life. I remember the early days, sitting at the computer drafting the new business plan, heart racing with both nerves and determination. This time will be different, I told myself, applying every lesson from the past. Tight financial control, no blind delegations, constant vigilance. Revenue grew steadily, but I was in no hurry. I had learned that real success isn't measured in money, but in coming home at peace, hugging my daughter, knowing no one can ever take this away again. After 2 shattered marriages, I closed the door on the idea of a new family. The wounds from Emily and Chloe run too deep. I no longer dare dream of a woman by my side. I no longer believe in marriage, once the foundation of my life, now just a risky illusion. But I still believe in duty, in love, and in the value of honesty. My days are simpler than ever. Driving Lily to school each morning, watching her wave from the classroom door with a radiant smile, cooking dinner together, simple pasta or chicken salad, talking about her day, teaching her to be kind in a world full of lies. Stay honest, sweetheart, no matter how hard it gets. Those moments are treasures. Reading by the fireplace, walking by the lake, stargazing while telling fairy tales. No more sleepless nights of worry, no more frantic bank calls, only the calm I never had before. Sometimes late at night, the memories still come like a scar that never fully fades. I wake sweating, reliving Chloe signing papers with her fake smile, Bernard's patronizing pat on the shoulder, Lucille's final venomous insults. The images rush back, heart racing, but I no longer fear them. I get up, make a cup of hot tea, stare into the dark window and remind myself, the nightmare is over. Those losses made me sharper, stronger, no longer blind to false trust. From Emily to Chloe, from the first bankruptcy to the Hart conspiracy, every blow was an expensive lesson. They taught me vigilance, the worth of truth, and that true happiness lies in simplicity. I no longer hate. Hatred only poisons the hater. I no longer wait for apologies from those who betrayed me. Bernard, Lucille, and Chloe are in prison, and for me, that is justice enough. The court's sentence closed everything. No apologies needed, no reparations required, only the truth laid bare. One quiet afternoon, I stood at the window watching Lily play in the yard, chasing a ball, laughing as the wind tossed her hair. Golden sunlight spilled across the green lawn. The lake sparkled in the distance, birds sang. In that moment, I understood that the most precious thing I kept through everything wasn't money or reputation, things that can vanish overnight. It was a small, intact family. Just the two of us, free of schemes, free of betrayal, only peace. Lily ran over and hugged my legs. "Daddy, come play with me." I laughed, scooped her up, and we ran into the yard, chasing each other under the sun. That is real happiness. Simple, genuine, and untouchable. The story ends here, not with revenge, but with liberation. Because in the end, the greatest thing I won back was the right to live a clean, free life. No more Chloe, no more hearts, no more sleepless nights over money, only me. Wyatt Lewis with my daughter and a future I draw myself. Life taught me that sometimes loss is the only way we find ourselves. And now, I have found mine, in quiet afternoons, in my daughter's smile, and in the peace I once thought I would never have.